What if you could actually get paid to stay sober? Yep, that's right. There are people that are paying other addicts and alcoholics to get and stay sober. This is something that I didn't believe was even a thing. I didn't believe it was true, but there are companies, there are people out there that are paying others to get and stay sober. There's actually a news report I found where California was one of the first states to start doing this, and people were getting paid as much as $300 or $1,000 to get and stay sober, which is interesting because the rehab industry is ridiculous. This is basically a multi-hundred billion dollar a year industry, and it's huge. And so when we look at it like, okay, would an addict get paid $1,000 to stay sober? Well, if rehab costs $90,000, it seems to actually make sense. But the question is, does it actually work in helping people get and stay sober? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I think this is a very important conversation to have when we're talking about motives. Because back when I was trying to get sober, I don't think you could have offered me any money to get and stay sober because I didn't have what it took. So that's what we're talking about today. Terry, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. And yeah, on the outside, contingency management looks like a really viable option, maybe. Mm-hmm. You know, it's worked for some. In the research I've done on it, you know, they say 60 to 80% success rate. Well, you know, I don't know about that. Success rates are, they're really hard to actually calculate accurately. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you know, it can be a tool. That's what I think. And
absolutely. Now, so for that term, what was it, contingency management? It sounds fancy. It sounds like, oh, we're going to go to the Contingency Management Center and get our check for staying sober. Now, one guy in the news report I read on NPR, he basically was like, hey, this is pretty cool. I get sober for 12 weeks, and then after I get $330 to go drink and use with. And it's like, wait a minute, I don't think that's what the plan's for, but you know, that is kind of how addicts think. And that might have been how I thought, like, hey, yeah, I get free drinks and stuff like that. We got a pretty pressing question from Becky we can take real quick before we get back into the other stuff. She says, if you've been detoxed and are on day 8, would drinking cause you to re-experience withdrawal? Absolutely. Yeah. Drinking is something you are putting in your body, so there needs to be a withdrawal from it. So absolutely a dangerous thing to look at, and you're starting the process all over again. Yeah. So if you detox for 8 days, Terry, you know, maybe can you share your experience of detoxing, being sober, in rehab, getting out, and going back to drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're sidetracked a little bit, but that's okay. This is really important. And for me, I detoxed and I went to rehab and I got out and I got sober. And after, I don't know, a week or two, something like that, I took that one drink and I was right back to where I was before. This is what happens if you have alcohol use disorder. You go right back to where you were. And so your tolerance level goes up. Everything goes right back up to where you were. And then I stopped. I decided I was going to quit. I didn't want to pay for rehab again. And I didn't want to go to the doctor, although I ended up going to a doctor. And I had the massive seizures, which happens with some people when they go through withdrawal. Fortunately, I was at the doctor at the time, so they were able to save me. If I'd been alone, I would not be here right now. That's how dangerous this stuff can definitely be. But when you start drinking again, you go right back to where you were. And that's as far as alcohol is concerned. So yeah, it's dangerous to start again. But
well, and it's an interesting thing because we're talking about like monetizing getting sober and incentives, because that's basically what that would be. If you were paying someone or you were getting paid to get and stay sober, that's an incentive saying that willpower is what's going to make it through, because that's what you're doing. You're saying, I don't have enough willpower to get myself up out of the gutter, but I do have willpower if someone's giving me money, which for some people, maybe that is the right motivation. Maybe they are struggling with that. But for me, you know, Becky brings an interesting question up, because the biggest driver for getting sober for me was having to go through detox and that cycle again. I was terrified of that cycle because I knew I would go back to it. I knew that I couldn't drink normally. I knew that it was a detriment to my health. I knew every time I detoxed, I was risking my health in a huge way. And we look at that and it's like, okay, what is it that I need to do? Right? And what I needed to do was get and stay sober. And I would look at it and times would go by where I'm like, okay, maybe the incentive is there to get sober and fix my business. Nah, that wasn't enough. Maybe the incentive is there to mend my family life. That wasn't enough because when I thought about my family life, I wanted to drink because I had screwed things up there. And maybe this, maybe that. But one of the things that kept me most sober was the fear of going through detox and the mental anguish again.
Absolutely.
I was terrified. I was like, I don't want to do that. Last time I detoxed, it was in a mental hospital and a real hospital, handcuffed. I don't want to do that again because I fear that maybe this time it'll be worse. And you know, it probably would be because it's like, okay, now I drank and now I got to drink to get through the fact that I broke my sobriety, which is another layer. And going through and looking at that is super important because we have to realize the insanity of the alcoholic. It is not driven by money. It's not driven by feelings and fear and everything like that. It's driven by chemical dependency.
Yes.
And while paying someone to get sober might be the catalyst, like if someone had come to me and was like, hey, not only is rehab going to be covered by the city or state, but we're also going to give you 10 grand. That probably would have gotten me in rehab a little bit sooner because it would have taken the sting away from leaving my work. Right? But at that time, it was like, no, alcohol recovery was not covered by my insurance. So I literally had to pay to get sober. And you know what? It worked. Why did it work? Because it had to. I went into rehab with the idea of I need to learn to get sober because my way of life is not working. And that was super important.
There's the difference there, and there's the challenge that with people that do the cognitive therapy. So cognitive therapy, you know, you find somebody that's going to help you through it, and they guide you, and they make all these goals, and then you get these incentives, and they work with you as far as the incentives go. Like, is it going to be money? Is it going to be, you know, a new car? Probably nothing like that, but you know, is it going to be something like that? And you get these incentives, and then you go in and you show that you're sober, and you know, you do a UA test or whatever it is, or that you went to 5 meetings in 5 days or something like that. And there's always goals involved with this, and so yeah, that may get you to go. But the one problem is, and this is the problem that I had when I first got sober, before I drank again and got sober finally for good, hopefully, is that I wasn't there yet. I didn't want to get sober. Maybe it was the fact that the consequences weren't big enough for me at that point yet. For me, it took almost losing my life. That was the consequence I had to experience before I finally got to that point where I was going to stay sober. But maybe it was the consequences. And I really wasn't looking at the benefits of sobriety because, you know, when you're drinking, you're like, oh, man, I'm going to get sober. Life's going to be boring. I'm not going to be able to do anything. You know, all that when in reality, all I was doing was sitting around watching bad TV and drinking. So I didn't have much of a life then. But I didn't see the benefits of sobriety at that point. And what this does is yes, it can be a catalyst, absolutely. But what Marcus did when he went to sobriety is he changed his thought process. He developed a new perspective towards life. And that's what has to happen in this. And if that can happen during cognitive or contingency management, then it can be successful. So contingency management, it can be an effective method if it's used with other things. We have to change the way we look at alcohol. We have to change the way we look at life. It's really difficult to see the benefits of sobriety when you're still drinking. And getting through that first phase of sobriety, usually things suck. You know, you're not happy. You don't feel good. You start to realize all this stuff you destroyed in life and relationships you broke and all that, and you're trying to figure out, what am I going to do now? And you got all this stuff that you want to take care of now, but maybe you're not mentally or physically able to because of the alcohol that just got out of your system. It's a difficult thing, but you can work through it, but it does have to be used with something that's going to help you change your perspective towards life and realize that you're chemically dependent and that maybe you're not thinking clearly, you know. So that's it's an important thing.
Absolutely. And I think the key is just looking at what it's going to do for you rather than the monetary gain,
Yeah.
right? What is it that is that really what's going to help you? Like, you might think so, but is it going to be long lasting? What's going to be long lasting is understanding that the chemical is the thing, right? That is what is causing it. And I think that if I was going to do that, and if I was in charge of that, what I would do is I would make people go through a recovery class, right? Not so much just, hey, I'm going to pay you to get and stay sober, but I'm going to, you're going to get paid to watch this course and partake in it, because that's where things would really change. And I think that's a key. Now, removing the barrier of money from rehab, I think, is something that needs to be done a long time ago, because unfortunately that is something that, insurance, I remember we had insurance people and they were getting kicked out left and right because they're like, oh, your insurance ran out. And it's like, okay, well, that sucks. This is something that people really need. And I, for one, think that the alcohol companies should pay for part of that if they really care, because it's like, hey, you know what, that is your chemical that is making people dependent. Sure, it's not, X, Y, and Z, but you make plenty of money. And I think that that would be a worthwhile thing. But, Congress is too busy making them more money than helping the little people. But that's for another day.
Absolutely. And Timber, I just wanted to address your one question you had at the beginning real quick. And it's off topic too, but you said you how do you handle a drunk person in an AA meeting? Find out if they're driving. Don't let them drive. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But, one thing about meetings, or any meeting, because I went to the hospital recovery groups as well, and not that drunk people went there because they would have been kicked out right away, but there were disruptive people, absolutely. And any meeting, the one benefit about meetings is it's practice for real life. You're going to deal with disruptive people in real life, and you learn patience and tolerance in those meetings. At least that's what I try to do. I try to just accept everybody for who they are. And if somebody's disruptive and drunk in a meeting, they're in the right place, right? And usually people will circle around them. Maybe they'll be asked to, if you could just be quiet and maybe we could talk to you after the meeting or something like that. But that's the main thing is I just try to make sure that they're going to be safe so that they don't hurt themselves.
Yeah.
After the meeting. It's really kind of that simple. But yeah, so cognitive therapy. I mean, I keep saying cognitive therapy, contingency management.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, like I said, it can be effective. And, a lot of the research shows that it's effective. But as I was saying, the research doesn't keep going as far as there's not a lot of studies on long-term effectiveness. And this can be useful. I mean, you could break it down really simply, break it down to its gut level as far as the incentives go. And it's like, a few, what is it, 2 or 3 years ago, I got a dog. We rescued a dog, and he was very, very scared. Absolutely terrified of everything, just severely terrified. And we started to work with a trainer. And I've had dogs for 30 years, and they've been fairly well trained. I've been pretty lucky, but some have been trained better than others, and I didn't take classes on how to train a dog and stuff, and worked with the person to help me train this dog to get it to not be so fearful. And it was the same thing. It was really contingency management. It was give the dog really high valued treats when he's doing something right. He now knows over 40 commands. He sticks right with me. A leash is not needed, and does crazy, awesome tricks. Through the legs, hops up. You can get him to hop up on a rock and sit and put his paw up, and all sorts of things. And it's that contingency management. He gets rewards, and it's really on the gut level. That's how simple it is, and it's just changed his brain to where he knows. And the fear, it's still there, but it's not as bad because he gets a lot of treats when we walk by another dog. That's what he's most afraid of, is other dogs, and and things like that. And so for the alcohol, if you really look at it, if you look at alcohol use disorder, and when we're really trying to get sober, it's almost the same thing, because as we get sober, sure, we may not see the benefits of getting sober right away, but we start to see them. And then as we continue on, we realize, wait, this sobriety is a pretty awesome thing. I can do simple things like go to the store at 11 o'clock at night and not have to worry, because I'm sober, I'm good. And I can do other things. I don't have to hide stuff anymore. I can be honest with people. I can be nice to people. I can develop these relationships and things like that. So we are kind of doing that as we're getting sober. It's just we don't get those right away instant satisfaction gains. And that's maybe one of the things that this method of getting sober is trying to address, because when we're drinking, we do want that instant satisfaction. And our brains have told us that alcohol is where that can come from. And that's what we're trying to replace that with. So, it can be effective, but only time will tell, really, for each person. And really, it's got to be individualized, and it really has to be looked at for each person. It really has, because some people it may not work, like Marcus was saying right in the beginning. Yeah, I get paid to get sober. All right, I'll stay sober for a little while. Absolutely. And then the money runs out, and it's like, okay, I need something else. Maybe I think I'll go back to drinking, or I got all this money. Now I'll definitely go back to drinking. I'll drink the better stuff.
That's how I would have thought.
But yeah.
Yep, that's definitely how I would have thought.
And I have an echo again. Oh no.
Do we have an echo? That's the first that we heard of it today.
Oh.
Is it bad echo, or is it just now happen?
Timber said.
Hey, Grim hit 600 days sober. Congrats, man. That's great.
Hey, right on. Good job, man. You've been around us for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Good to see you. And hello, Dave, and all the regulars. Great. And new people. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. But as far as the method of getting sober, really, and I've said it many times, try everything. We're talking about this method. This method is I haven't seen it that much out there, and that's really because government, insurance, they don't want to pay for it, because they don't agree with pay to get somebody sober. They're not going to do that, so because they want to get paid, right? So that's probably why we don't see it too much. You can find it, and it's calling the hospitals or therapists, things like that. Most of them know about it, and I don't know if any of you have done any of that. If you have, let us know. Definitely, we'd like to hear. But there's many ways to get sober, and a lot of people do the 12-step program, and millions have gotten sober that way. And some people do the hospital recovery groups. Some people will actually quit on their own. I find a lot of people that just quit on their own, if they were real deep into their alcoholism, a lot of them don't tend to stay sober when they try it on their own. Some do, and some that stay sober, haven't really developed a way of living to where maybe they're necessarily at least content. But some do, absolutely. They figure out things to do. Some people, I know some people that have just, they get real heavily into their church or something like that, and that works as well. And it's just really, you have to find a method that's going to work. And really the only way to do that is to be open-minded and try everything you possibly can and start to settle in on what might work for you. So, yeah, and Bionic Loaf 76. Congratulations on quitting on your own, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right, cool. Anything else to add to that, or any questions from the listener inners people?
I'm scrolling through the comments here real quick. I'm looking at the screen. Yeah, new moves talking to you. Must have said something about sugar. Yeah, sugar's a tough one too. Definitely.
Yeah. The key is just replace it. Like I remember when I first got out of rehab and sober, I had candy all the time. I was going nuts with candy. Even had it in rehab. And a couple of years ago, I noticed that like fruit is just as satisfying in candy, but you feel good after. Like it actually tastes better. Like the companies that make candy are shortchanging you by charging you more for crappy crap, and it doesn't even taste as good. Like berries or oranges, it tastes just as good.
Yeah, for me, it takes a little while to get used to the fruit. Not used to it, but to make it satisfying versus the candy. But the candy, you get that big insulin rush, especially if you have a lot of it, and then you don't feel so good afterwards. And the fruit releases the sugars much slower because of the fibers involved in all that, and it helps a lot for me.
Yeah.
Definitely. Dice.
Well, and it's funny because it's like, you look at issues in the past, and it's like, well, scurvy was a major issue, and it was caused by no vitamin C. It's like, eat an orange, Unfortunately, a lot of health stuff is hidden because diet is more about convenience and quick fix, rather than, hey, let's do something that's long term. Like every morning I get up and, I try to ride my bike every morning, and sometimes you don't want to. You're like, I don't know, I'm pretty tired. Like today I was tired, but you feel better after you do that. I notice with coffee, it's like, okay, well, you usually wake up 20 minutes after, you get out of bed anyway, you're usually awake. But we're attributing that to coffee. You usually relax in a social situation 20 minutes after you get there, but we're drinking, so we attribute that to drinking, even though it's going to happen anyway. And it's very important to look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brandon, thank you. Thanks for the thank you. I appreciate that. And I know you said you're still struggling. You'll get there. Keep trying, man. Yep. You can do it.
You want to talk about, let's see. I think I can put the screen up. We'll talk about our Talk Sober program. You want to do the commercial or me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. I think I can, let's see where this goes. I think it goes over you. There. Oh, yeah.
Good to see you again.
So if you go over to talksober.com, you can click this big yellow button here and join our sobriety course. It gives you a bunch of MP3s and tools to help you get and stay sober. This is about the mindset stuff. We're not doctors or anything. But we did get sober under different circumstances that were pretty crazy. And this is all about that. So there's like 31 letters to go through. There's 31 MP3s. It's meant to be every day for a month. And what it'll do is it'll give you the mindset that helped us get sober. And it'll help you overcome some of the obstacles where it's like, oh, normally I would go drink over that. This will help you with that and help you understand what's going on with your mind, help you understand chemical dependency, everything like that. And all you got to do is go to talksober.com, click on the big yellow button there. It'll take you to this form, fill it out. You can cancel whenever you want. It's only $27, and it does help us keep this show going, which is good because we want to do this more full-time with Terry and provide more resources, which I think the community is missing out on a lot of the chemical dependency because the self-help industry has permeated the alcohol industry, and I think that's detrimental because we can't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We need to understand what's going on with our mind, and it's not manifesting and thinking positive. It's getting rid of the alcohol, and that's very difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Alan, you were saying you still struggle with getting to meetings, and you're glad you get to hear us. I appreciate that. But the struggling part, as far as what you're going to do, you know, today for sobriety, look at it this way. Well, one person told me as far as meetings were concerned, but this is with any sobriety program that you're going to do. Whatever you're doing, the night of, or the night before, think about, what am I going to do for sobriety tomorrow? So what am I going to do? Not should I do something, or should I go to this meeting? It's like, which one, or what exactly am I going to do? What time am I going to do it? And then I need to fix my schedule around that. For me, I have to put sobriety as the top priority. So that's what becomes my top priority. And then other things in life have to go around that. And that's kind of the way I had to do.
Yeah.
Derek says, "Hey Terry, why do you cover your face?" I don't know.
Because it won't cover mine.
My lighting's
the way
too
it's
light, that's why.
Now the way it's set up is Terry's is actually piped in by Skype, which means I can put something here. Mine's an actual physical camera block. So mine, like if I move mine, it gets all funny. Right? This is what it looks like without it, right? It's kind of weird. But we got a lot of tech stuff here, which, you know, going to talksober.com helps us out with all this stuff too.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, cool deal, guys. The main thing is understanding that being sober is the main thing. Someone says, what if I live with someone who drinks? That's going to be very difficult. Maybe try asking them nicely, hey, I'm trying to get sober. Can you drink outside the house, or maybe hide it from me, or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. It's a difficult thing to do, and it's really difficult to approach them when they're drinking. If they're constantly drunk, that's a bigger challenge, obviously. But when they're sober, having a sit down, serious conversation. It's the last thing I ever wanted to do or want to do is have those serious conversations. But if you're trying to stay sober, you know, this is important stuff. So it's important to have these conversations in a calm manner. You know, you start yelling at them, it ain't going to work.
No.
So that's got to be the method that you use, definitely.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, I think that's about it for today. Go over to talksober.com, click the yellow button, get signed up, and we'll see you inside there. And if you guys got any questions, reach out to myself or Terry, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Now to find the button. I got a blinding light right here, so I can't find the button. What's the status of the book? I need to finish it. Yeah, I have one chapter left, and I think Terry helped with some of it. So we'll revisit that and get it rocking and rolling. All right, guys, have a good one.
Thanks, Dave.